Today I've got a budget dex roundup for Pokemon Pocket that you're going to be fairly likely to be able to build as you start your collection experience. My definition of budget dex is all of the cards in these deck lists are going to come from a single pack with a small asterisk that all of them are playing Sabrina because she's a good utility card, so you should pick her up with pack points if you're not opening Charizard packs to start. And there are no EX Pokemon in any of these decks with the exception of a single copy of Executor EX or Marowak EX in a couple of them because you can be guaranteed to get that EX Pokemon if you pick your pack right at the start. Let's go ahead and dive on into the details and talk about some of the sweet things you can build on a budget. We're going to kick things off with Charizard pack focus decks because in my opinion that's the best pack new Pokemon Pocket players should be opening. Get a full breakdown on why that is linked in the video description down below for one of my other videos. Our first Charizard pack deck is Mono Blue Greninja. Greninja is one of my absolutely favorite stage 2 Pokemon in the game. It gives you a lot of utility and finesse. Its Pokemon ability, letting you tag anything on the board for 20 every turn, means that your opponents can't just retreat back away from you with low health things, denying you knockout points. This ability warps the entire way your opponent has to approach playing the game. We supplement Greninja with good early attackers. Farfetch'd loves going second and starts cracking for 40 damage right away, and Golduck for just 2 energy can start hitting for 70 a turn very quickly. Our second Charizard pack deck is focused around Alakazam, a phenomenal stage 2 that is a heavy hitter against Pocket's other heavy hitters. This attack starts with a base 60 damage and then scales 30 for every energy on the opposing Pokemon. It makes him excellent against things like Venusaur EX, Mewtwo EX, and Charizard EX that all are going to have lots of energies on them. In order to give us time to get Alakazam set up, this deck starts with one of 2 different colorless Pokemon, either Farfetch'd or Kangaskhan, so we can start putting damage on the opponent's starting Pokemon early while we get our big attacker and Alakazam set up in the backline. A notable trainer inclusion in this deck is the 2 copies of X-Speed, because any game where you start with an Abra in play, you're going to want to hopefully dig with Pokeballs or Professor's Research for a Farfetch'd or Kangaskhan to quickly swap that out so your end game Pokemon isn't getting hit at the start. If you're looking to start getting knockout points ASAP, Blaine decks like this one are a phenomenal way to do that. Blaine's an incredibly powerful supporter card that adds 30 damage to the next attack done by a Ninetales, a Rapidash, or a Magmar. This lets Rapidash crack for 70 for just 1 energy, or it lets Ninetales crack for a whopping 120 for 2 energy, which can one-hit KO things like Pikachu EX. Because this deck list is focused around 2 stage 1 Pokemon and a basic and Magmar, it also gets to play a variety of utility trainers on top of Blaine. Potion is especially useful in this deck when you're playing into the Mewtwo matchup because generally speaking, Rapidash or Ninetales goes down into its to Mewtwo, but Potion changes that breakpoint to give you a 3rd turn and often the time you need to get set up and fully win. Next up, we have a Vileplume Executor deck, the first deck we're going to cover today that showcases an EX Pokemon, because if you pick Charizard as your first pack, you're guaranteed to get that EX Executor in it to start. This deck list essentially looks to start on a regular Executor or a Farfetch while it builds up the powerful Vileplume in the backline, who not only has a hefty health pool of 140 points, but notably not only hits for 80, but also has a 50% chance of your opponent not being able to attack or retreat the following turn thanks to sleep. The health pool in combination with Erica is especially noteworthy on Vileplume because 140 plus 50 gives you a total of 190, which means Vileplume can survive 2 hits from things like Pikachu or Starmie EX, which are common aggressive decks in the format. One thing to note with the inclusion of EX Executor in this deck list is that even under non-budget concerns, I think you only want 1 Executor EX. Under ideal circumstances, this deck is never starting with an EX Pokemon. One of the strengths of these single prize point decks is that your opponent needs to chew through 3 of your Pokemon in order to get the match win. So ideally, you're making them knock out 2 things and then you're finishing on the Executor EX as opposed to starting on it, leaving it stranded because it has a high retreat cost and letting your opponent win the game with only 2 knockouts. Our final Charizard pack deck is my personal favorite. It is a 2-color Greninja Executor deck that's again sporting that Singleton EX. Basic idea here is relatively straightforward. You start on the regular Executor or Farfetch to start chipping up damage early, and then Greninja evolves in your backline to come in and play cleanup, either because your opponent retreated things that your aggressive start put back on their bench, or because it can effectively hit for 80 damage a turn with Water Shuriken plus its deal 60 attack. One thing to note when playing a 2-color deck like this is you get to know what your first energy is going to be during the setup portion of the game when you're playing out your starting Pokemon. This means you can know if you're going to have Grass or Water, which can inform whether or not you're going to want to start on Execute, Froakie, or Farfetch, depending on what your hand looks like. On to our Mewtwo pack focus decks, we kick things off with a Sand/Marowak matchup that again is featuring a Singleton EX that you're guaranteed to get if you choose Mewtwo packs as your ones to start. Similar to like I talked about with the Executor EX decks earlier, an ideal start for this deck is not beginning on Marowak EX, but rather finishing on it. You want to focus on making your opponent chip their way through 2 of your single knockout point Pokemon before you finish on your most powerful card that they would get 2 points for knocking out early. This deck list is pretty well positioned against Pikachu EX since not only is fighting type the Electric's weakness, but your starting Pokemon Sandslash and Marowak both have 100 base HP, which allows them to survive a single 90-point hit. The potions are also key in this deck list, like any deck with 100 hit point Pokemon, because potion gives you an extra turn against Mewtwo EX before you get knocked out. Our next Mewtwo pack deck is Weezing Arbok. If you enjoy being aggressive and disruptive, this is a fantastic first deck to try and build towards. Weezing is one of the most potent stage 1s in the game, in my opinion. Its Poison Gas lets you start stacking up damage right away, especially when paired with its 1 energy 30 damage tackle. And then you add Koga into the mix, allowing you to bounce Weezing back to your hand to effectively give you a free retreat to swap up something on the bench while simultaneously wiping all damage off it, and you have a ton of utility and surprise that's difficult for your opponent to play around. Arbok is no slouch in this deck either, with its corner cracking for 60 points of damage for just 2 energy, and more importantly, locking your opponent's Pokemon into the active spot. This is especially deadly when paired with our 2 copies of Sabrina, because Sabrina can bring up something they don't have charged up for energy and don't want to keep up, and then Arbok can keep it locked in place. Our last Mewtwo pack deck is around fan favorite Dragonite. This powerful non-EX finisher threatens to end most games in just 2 attacks, as it doles out a total of 200 points of damage spread across your opponent's entire board. The game plan of this deck is relatively straightforward. You're going to start on Weezing and get some chip shot in with its Poison Gas while you build up Dragonite on your bench to 4 energies. You can then use Koga to either buy yourself more time or switch the Dragonite to your active and quickly end the game. Something that's noteworthy if you're going to play this deck is that inside of the deck editor, you want to unselect Dark Energy, so your energy zone only produces lightning and water. This reduces the extreme variance that a 3 energy color deck would have, and Weezing's primary job is just to take hits and deal a little bit of damage, so it's not a huge downside if you're not getting tackles in. Moving to Pikachu pack focus budget decks, we kick things off with a 1 knockout point aggressive electric deck. Electrode cracks for 70 points for 2 energy, and Jolteon is personally one of my favorite sleeper cards. It does on average 80, but swings high up to 160 for just 2 energy on a non-EX. We also get to play Zebstrika to play cleanup. Once your opponent's retreated to the safety of their bench from your early heavy hitters, Zebstrika can come in and play cleanup, getting you key knockout points to end the game. For the sake of transparency and setting expectations, I will say that this Nido's deck that's on your screen now and the 3rd deck for the Pikachu pack, I think are a little bit on the weaker side overall, which is one of the many reasons why I recommend against opening Pikachu packs when you're first starting off. That being said, if you are going in on them because Pikachu is one of your favorite Pokemon, I wanted to provide some options that you can have fun with a little bit of variety with. This Nido's deck is relatively straightforward. It's just pure Nido Queen line and Nido King line with a Farfetch as an extra 5th basic to add pressure and consistency for you early. Trainers are nothing too exciting. We've got X speed to fix your starting Pokemon and a potion to help you dodge some of those break points, especially on your 90 HP Nidorino. Our last deck list in the Pikachu pack and this video is a Lieutenant Surge Raichu deck. So Surge is a pretty potent supporter card that can give you some surprise burst. It moves all energy from your bench Pokemon up to an active Raichu or Electrode in this deck. But Electrode's primary purpose is the fact that it has a free retreat cost. So an ideal opener is you start on Electrode and get in a hit or two before you need to retreat it before it gets knocked out. Then you can switch up your Raichu and Lieutenant Surge those energies off your damage Electrode to get a big burst off of Raichu for 140. Magneton also has solid synergy with Lieutenant Surge since evolving into it gives you an extra energy every single turn. While this card looks a little bit scuffed on the surface, only dealing 60 damage for 4 energy, another way to think about Magneton is that because it's giving itself a free energy every turn, it's kind of a deal 60 for 2, which isn't quite on rate, but it's pretty darn close. Hopefully today's roundup gave you some fantastic Pokemon Pocket decks to work towards as you're starting your journey. As you get more and more cards, you're looking to build more decks that have cards spread out across packs. Be sure you check out all the other awesome content I have on this channel. I've been posting deck highlights regularly since the soft launch started back at the beginning of October, and there's a ton of sweet off-meta brews up here that are a ton of fun that I've found success with. Thank you for making it all the way through to the end of the video. If you did enjoy what you watched, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming content. If you're not familiar with me, my name's Jeff Hoagland. I've been making card game and strategy content on the internet for over a decade. I played Magic the Gathering and regular paper Pokemon competitively in a former life before focusing on making videos here to support myself and my family. You'll find me streaming at twitch.tv/Jeff Hoagland, typically 5 days a week, with Pokemon Pocket and some Marvel Snap being my current focus. I'd love to see you again sometime.